everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is another installment in my How I Made series, where I talk about how I made some of my older pre-YouTube costumes. I did actually have a specific request recently for a video on my deck dress from Titanic, which also happens to still be one of my favorite cosplays that I've ever made. I made this dress back in 2017, so 5 years ago at this point, for a group costume for the 2018 Costume College, where a whole bunch of us decided to make Titanic dresses. Some of us made cosplays directly from the movie, and a bunch of people made Titanic era dresses, and actually we even had one very creative costumer, Firetail Design, who made a 19-teens era iceberg costume. In all, I think there were actually 16 of us who dressed to this theme. I also wore this costume on 2 other occasions that year. First on Halloween, when I happened to be in Las Vegas on a work trip, so I decided to take a little excursion and go see the Titanic exhibition there. And second, right before Costume College, a few of us actually dressed up to go walk around the Queen Mary ship in Long Beach and take lots of fun pictures. So anyway, let's talk about how I made this cosplay, since it turned out to be pretty complicated. The yellow portion of this dress was made of a single layer of pale yellow silk taffeta, actually part of the same yardage that I bought for my 1890s gala gown dress that year, which was purchased from Home Fabrics in the Fabric District. Let me know if you would like me to do another of these videos on that 1890s gala gown. The bodice taffeta was flat-lined with muslin, while the skirt taffeta was actually completely unlined. The upper white portion of the bodice is made of polyester crepe, which I think I actually got from Joann's, and is also flat-lined with muslin. Dora has decided she wants to interrupt this video, so we're gonna do this with a cat on my lap. Now, really, the yellow dress fabric in the movie was actually a bit more gold, and it was leaf printed silk satin, so the original had a lot more drape than mine. I believe that the original dress was also made of, somehow, just one width of fabric all the way around, because the only visible seam is in the center front. But because I'm a larger size than Kate Winslet, that was not going to work for me. So I honestly don't know how I used to work so fast, but I actually made this entire project quite quickly, in only about 10 days or less. The entire yellow portion of the dress was just draped on my dress form to get the shapes right before I ever wound up trying it on. There's a lot of odd tucking and pleating in the skirts, which I really needed to see hanging on the dress form to know if I got the right shape. My skirt is made out of 3 panels, 1 back and 2 front panels, with seams on the side and up the center front. These skirt panels actually curve out and then back in again, reaching their maximum width a little bit below the knee and creating a narrower shape by the time they reach the hem. The yellow portion of the bodice is cut completely separately from the skirts, again made of 3 pieces. The bodice, however, closes a bit off to the left side, giving the dress overall what is called a dogleg closure. This was a very common closure in the mid-Victorian period, but it can also be found in the Edwardian era and the 19-teens, especially since the 19-teens just really loved strange closure locations and formations. There are smallish pleats on each side of the front, which line up in both the skirt and the bodice, where darts would commonly be. The back of the bodice is just one straight panel with no darts or pleats for shaping, whereas the back of the skirt has 2 large pleats on each side, with the middle one forming a large box pleat. In the center front seam of the skirt, there are 2 small horizontal tuck pleats at just below the knee level and 3 more of them right at the hem, all of which pull the center front upwards just a bit to create a very interesting draped effect. In the center back, the skirt is pulled up in a large tuck around mid-thigh height, and there's a long tab piece that extends from about 1.5 inches above the waist seam and then extends down over the center back box pleat and down to the tuck, where it's then hand sewn in place, making it look as if this hanging tab is helping to hold this large tuck in place. The large tuck creates a rather exaggerating amount of draping in the back, which causes the sides of the skirts to come in a bit at the hem and the back of the hem to swing outwards away from the legs. This is exaggerated by the silk taffeta and honestly probably wouldn't swing outwards, at least not as much, had I used silk satin. The skirt hem is just a very narrow hem. Dora is going to fall off my lap. The skirt hem is just a very narrow hem where the edge has just been turned twice and then whip stitched in place. The entire yellow portion is also attached to the kimono sleeve portion of the upper bodice as well. This upper bodice is made using a short sleeve pattern based on a kimono sleeve, meaning that the sleeves aren't cut separately from the body, or in this case, since it's so cropped, meaning that it's not cut separately from the shoulders. Once the shoulder seam was sewn, then the upper portion was embroidered on my embroidery machine using a sort of swirly pattern that I had already had that looked pretty close to the one from the movie. I compiled many units of this pattern on my machine in various configurations so that I could curve it around the neckline and shape it around the edges of the sleeves. After the shoulder, the neckline, and the sleeve areas were embroidered, the underarm seams of the kimono bodice were sewn. Separately, the standing collar in the back was also embroidered, and it was then attached to the neckline. The rest of the neckline was then finished just with bias binding, as were the sleeve hems, and vintage lace was then hand sewn around the neckline, with wide portions of the lace around the V of the neck and narrow scallops of the same lace added to the top edge of the standing collar. This entire upper bodice portion was then attached to the silk bodice, with the very edge of the silk just top stitched down by machine down to the upper portion. In the front, this upper portion fits flatly to the bodice, but in the back, there's actually two small pleats that were needed to fit the upper portion to the lower. And because the upper portion closes right at the center, whereas the lower portion's closure is off center, I had to pay careful attention to joining them together, and the upper portion winds up looking weirdly short on the left side, even though it is actually the center of the bodice. The bodice closes up the front with skirt hooks and bars because I thought they'd be the flattest, including one at the bottom of the neckline, with the rest along the edge of the closure, continuing down through the edge of the skirt closure. An entirely separate underblouse was also created for this costume. The body of the blouse, which is just like a pullover style with little darts right here, is made just out of muslin, and then the sleeves are made out of the same polyester crepe as the upper portion of the dress. There's also a little inset of the poly crepe that's added right at the neckline where it peeks out from beneath the overbodice. This blouse has corresponding gold embroidery around the cuffs, which was again embroidered flat before the sleeve seam was sewn. I didn't bind these sleeves. I actually used additional muslin to make a facing for the cuff so that the back of the embroidery wouldn't irritate my wrists. This is a pretty basic fitted long sleeve blouse pattern with a somewhat scooped neckline, and once the blouse was sewn up, more of the vintage lace was added to both the ends of the sleeves as well as to that polyester inset in the neckline. Lastly, there is also a separate belt piece, which is just a straight strip of taffeta, which has then been pleated twice along the length of the belt. This closes with hooks and eyes in the back, and it has a slide buckle in the center front. The slide buckle was actually one of the most difficult pieces to source for this project, and it wound up being a vintage plastic slide buckle, which I think was originally green, and which I found at a pop-up secondhand Halloween costume shop after finishing the entire rest of the dress a couple months earlier. I then painted it antique gold with acrylic paints. Unfortunately though, I couldn't actually find this belt when it came time to film this video, hence why all of the detail shots that you've been seeing or this here in the background does not contain the belt. I do hope that it turns up though, because I am sure that I will want to wear this costume again at some point or other. The belt was actually worn underneath this center back tab that's attached to the tuck, which lets this tab hang freely away from the body. For accessories, I purchased dyeable satin Louis heeled shoes from a seller on Etsy, and I dyed them yellow to match the dress. These shoes have a large standing tongue on the front, and I made rosettes out of the yellow silk taffeta and a little pearl cameo type button in the center, and I added these to pin backs so they could pin onto the front of the shoe. Unfortunately, after wearing these very uncomfortable shoes, I might add, with this outfit the 3 times that I mentioned earlier, I wore them again that year at costume college on gala night with my yellow silk 1890s evening gown, and I wound up losing one of the rosettes somewhere. My other accessories were a small vintage paste stone pendant necklace, pearl drop earrings, and a yellow and blue silk reticule that I had made in the past at costume college. What? The entire ensemble is worn over my 19 teens corset and a princess slip, which are both in turn worn over a modern bra and camisole. Getting the chance to wear this outfit on the Queen Mary was definitely the highlight of this cosplay experience, as several of us dressed up in our Titanic outfits and we had a delightful meal together, and then we were able to go all over the ship taking some amazing pictures and even reenact the iconic spitting scene.
All right, you gotta lean back. You gotta really good.
I was so glad that my friends were willing to accompany me, and I really hope that the Queen Mary is able to open up again soon, because it is truly a wonderful place to visit. Overall though, I was very pleased with how this, my first Titanic cosplay, turned out. And that is your hint for an upcoming project, because I'm hoping that early next year I will be able to make the iconic swim dress, that lovely chiffon confection, and the pink coat, assuming I can find the fabrics, of course. And I'm planning to wear them to Emerald City Comic Con in March. So please keep your fingers crossed for me that I can find all of the materials and that I am able to defeat the chiffon of the dress. Anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed this look at how I made one of my favorite past historical cosplays. This is part of a larger series, as I mentioned, so I've linked to the How I Made playlist up here and also down below in the description, just in case you want to check out any of those past videos. If you like this video though, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon, and if you'd like to see more videos from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs out on Tuesdays and other random costuming content like this out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks right here on YouTube. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Guardian level patrons, Sharon and Mirage. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!